There's hope, ladies and gentlemen. Arguably the upset of the college basketball season. Okay, that might be a stretch, but at least in terms of conference games across the country, Saturday featured the upset of the year in 2025 as Seton Hall, who came in at 6-18, upset two-time defending national champion UConn at the Rock in such improbable fashion, overcoming two possession deficits in the final minute of regulation and the final minute of overtime. A gritty win for a gritty group that, even though they're down this season, it's been a rough season. They've never lost hope. They never gave up. And Saturday was the culmination of that. So for the first time, it feels like a while, here on Hoist the Colors, we're in a pretty jovial mood. I'm Tim Best. He's Pat Madden. Pat, I know you were in the building. I kind of envy you there, even though I was filling in for the Utica Comets that night on PA. I mean, where do we even begin from your perspective being in the Rock? And what was the vibe going into the game, and how did you see the team's vibe and the crowd's vibe shift throughout the course of what was just an epic game?
Well, let's start by mentioning a couple of things, which it's sort of funny, and I mentioned this to former guests of the show, once and future guest, Daily Does a Hoops founder and uh, content, one of the best bloggers in college basketball, Jaden Daly, uh, and I had mentioned the fact that Dan Hurley, you know, gives all of this information before a game about who's playing and who's not, and what their health status is for Connecticut. Because he does these pregame availabilities, and they get widely publicized. Whereas Shaheen Holloway, basically, you have to wait until you see who's wearing a team uniform and who's wearing or a sweatsuit before you figure out who's playing and who's not. So I guess the first thing I noticed when everyone lines up, coming out about 5-10 minutes for the game, is that Dylan Adewusu is in a uniform, and we haven't seen that in about a month. Scotty Middleton's in a uniform, and we haven't seen that in a few weeks. So right off the bat, although the lineup was, I think the starting lineup was the same as the one that they brought out uh, for the uh, for the game. I think it was the Georgetown game. I think the lineup was the same as the Georgetown game. Aaron, Felton, Coleman, Aligbe, and who would have been the fourth guy? Uh, shoot,
Wasn't
Coleman,
Middleton? Okay, it
not
wasn't
Middleton.
Middleton.
No, it's not Middleton.
It,
Coleman. It's Coleman, Aligbe, Felton, Aaron, and
did Duwall start?
Duall. That's right. Garway Duall, yes. So that's the same starting lineup you had for Georgetown. But, you know, you're thinking, could we see Wusu? Could we see Middleton? And then about it, you didn't see Holloway make any changes the first 7 or 8 minutes of the game. Now, of course, the flip side to that is Seton Hall didn't get blown out right off the bat. They come out and Felton hits a basket, Coleman hits a couple of baskets, Duell hits a couple of baskets, and they're hanging on and taking a lead early in that game against Connecticut, which of course is markedly different than what we've seen all year, where Butler puts a big beating on us early. Georgetown took a big lead on us at the St. John's put a big lead on us. Oklahoma State. So right off the bat, the fact that this game is competitive is already a surprise because of the way Connecticut had beaten Creighton later in the week or earlier in the week. So then Dylan Adewusu comes in and Middleton comes in. Uh, and they both do things early on in the game, which gives you the thinking, okay, this is about the way Seton Hall has looked in some of the better games we've seen them play, like the DePaul game, Uh, the DePaul game where they won, the Georgetown game, which they almost pulled out at the first Butler game out at Henkel early in January. So already you know that there's certain players. So then the game sort of gets, you sort of get to the back. And Seton Hall obviously takes a 3-point lead into the half, uh, which could have been a bigger lead if the offensive. But that's been the story all year. You can't expect Seton Hall's offense to run on all cylinders because it's the middle of February and that hasn't happened yet. So they're up by 3, and you're sort of like, and it's, you're sort of like, all right, I was in my own way counting every minute that the game stayed competitive. The game was staying competitive, and you get to 30 minutes, and I think of 10 minutes ago, Seton Hall was up by 2, and then I think at about the 8-minute mark, Connecticut makes a little bit of a run. Caravan hits a 3, which Alex Caravan has been in a major slump for Connecticut. So the fact that he goes and hits a Caravan is like, okay, this is where the game's going to go UConn's way. Because the minute that Caravan starts feeling it and starts hitting jump shots, it opens things up for everybody else. It opens things up for Solomon Ball. It opened things up for Liam McNeely, and so on and so forth. Ball was a non-factor after the 8-minute mark, except when we get, of course, to the last play of the game. He's a factor for the wrong reason. McNeely made plays here and there, but McNeely was not nearly the same as he was when they beat Creighton on a week ago on Tuesday night out in Omaha. Caravan hits a couple more threes. So that's when UConn gets the lead with the minute ago in regulation. So then you sort of you sort of the sequel, and now maybe we should probably just break down each of the different sequences, the one in regulation and the one in overtime, because they're two different sequences, and different things happened to get Seton Hall to where they got to at the end of regulation and the end of overtime.
So, before we talk about the big moments in the game, I mean, what can you tell us about, like from your perspective, the crowd's role in terms of how they were feeling going into the game, and then as the game wore on, you see like Seton Hall like willing their way to not letting UConn run away with this game. I mean, I would love to know what your take is on what the vibe in the crowd was throughout the course of the game.
Well, let me throw something out there first. I was very surprised there were not more UConn fans in the building. Now granted, weekends are better for Seton Hall crowds than weeknights. I mean, obviously the crowd that showed up for Butler was, abysmal. The crowd that had showed up for Providence the week before was also pretty bad. So, the games that were leading up to this one, this was, I think, Seton Hall's first weekend game since, I think, the St. John's game.
Correct.
4 weeks ago. So, already, I think most of the people who had tickets for Seton Hall showed up. But I thought that there would be a lot more Connecticut people in the building. Now, I think we talked a little bit off in our preview before we came on, was that because they were predicting about 5 or 6 inches of snow in Connecticut, people didn't come down from Connecticut for this game because they were afraid when they came back, uh, they weren't going to be able to. They weren't going to be able to get. They weren't going to want to travel the roads coming back from Newark to Connecticut on the way back because of all the snow they were predicting up there. So right off the bat, you didn't have the UConn in a game like this, and this has happened over at Madison Square Garden when they've played St. John's the last few years. When UConn makes a big run, the noise from Connecticut fans overwhelms the building. And that's obviously ticked off St. John's fans for years because they're like, why are UConn fans louder than us on our home court? So I obviously was expecting that the UConn fans were going to overwhelm our fans, and it didn't quite happen because the UConn fans, for whatever reason, didn't show up at the Prudential Center on Saturday afternoon. So right then and I think the Seton Hall fans, on the other hand, didn't want to go all in on this because everyone was expecting UConn to make the big run and put Seton Hall away, uh, and that never really happened. Again, they took. I mean, it's funny. There was a clip. Seton Hall did the Seton Hall basketball account. They haven't had a lot of chances to do this year, but what they've done very well in the past was do these little 5-minute videos, 5-minute highlight videos where they put in Gary Cohen's comments
Yep.
on top of all of the big plays. So this came out this morning, and I think when Caravan hits a layup to make it in regulation, I think it was in regulation when they went up by, I think they went up by 5 or 7.
It was a Caravan 3. They got it to 7.
Right. And he said it was a dagger,
Mm-hmm.
meaning I think that this is the Seton Hall had a good run for 39 minutes, but this game is over. So then what happens after that is, the chaos that ensues. They foul Wusu on a drive, and he hits two, and then they couldn't get the ball in bounds. So then they start struggling with that, and of course, then there's obviously we could get to, we could get Wusu hits the layup when they're up, when to make it to go from 5 to 3 with 12 seconds to go. And at that point, you sort of sit there and you're like, you know what? They're good. UConn's going to get the ball in bounds. We're going to foul them. They're going to hit 1 out of 2, and the game's going to be over. So then we get to 12 seconds to go in regulation after Wusu hits what we think is just they gave him the layup. Just because when you're up by 5, the last thing you want to do is foul anybody because you want the clock to run. So then we get to 58-55, 12 seconds to go.
All
So
right.
then I guess,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
All
I
right.
think you might have lagged on me, but yeah, go ahead. I mean, tell the story, man. Tell the story.
So we get to 12 seconds to go. And Caravan's having trouble getting the ball in the last minute. And on that point, I think he had to use another timeout earlier to get the ball in. So obviously what Seton Hall's doing, the lineup you have in there is Middleton, Aligbe, Wusu, Coleman, and Duel.
Uh-huh.
Holloway goes with the small lineup because he wants guys who can, run around and double and do traps. And Middleton's running in front of Caravan. Caravan has no idea how to handle it. So then at that point, McNeely slips, and the ball ends up and McNeely slips, and they call the 5 seconds on Caravan. So then Seton Hall's getting the ball under their basket with 12 seconds to go. And at that point, your first reaction to that is, all right, when and if will UConn foul? Will UConn foul up 3, or or will they try to play it out and dare Seton Hall to hit a 3 to go to overtime? So I think what happens is UConn did a good job keeping the ball out of the 3-point. Basically, at that point, Holloway puts Aaron Aronabe, Godwell Aaron Aronabe, who was tremendous in this game, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Tremendous in the game. He brings Aaron Aronabe, and I think in part because he knows that if you foul, you want him in to rebound. You want him. You're going to miss the second shot to try to get another possession. So Aaron Aronabe is there to rebound a missed foul shot. So then Aaron Aronabe gets a free pass into the lane, misses a dunk. The ball bounces 25 feet out and somehow ends up in Isaiah Coleman's hands. And before UConn has the opportunity to foul Coleman, and they may not want to have had to foul Coleman, because if you remember a couple of weeks ago, Coleman did some magic act to get 3 foul shots which could have tied the Providence game. So at that point, their goal was just to get the ball out of Coleman's hands. It ends up in Dylan Adewusu's hands. Wusu, of course, his first instinct is chuck the ball up at the basket, and somehow this one goes in. 3 seconds to go. I think at that point it was they got the ball in the Solomon ball, and he threw a ball up the top of the backboard, and we're going to overtime. So then, if we look at the overtime a little bit, same thing happened in the first 4 minutes of overtime that happened in the last 4 minutes of regulation. UConn makes a few plays. I think Caravan hit another three, and they get back into that spot where they're up by 2 possessions with a minute to go again. Uh, and then it's again the issues they had inbounding the ball rear their head up again. And at some point, they had to bring Liam McNeely in to try to inbound the ball because it just wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening with Caravan. So then we get to the play with, I forgot who hit the basket that cut the lead to one. No, you know what? No,
Um,
what it was? They fouled at that point. They fouled, which they couldn't do in regulation. At that point, they fouled. I think they fouled Coleman.
yes, they did.
They found Coleman. Coleman hits the two shots, gets the game back to one with 9 seconds to go. And then comes the play when they managed to get the ball into Solomon Ball. And then there's was he reached in? Was he, I mean, there was contact between Middleton and Ball. No question about it. For some reason, our good friend Brian O'Connell gives it a play on. Middleton gets the ball, drives to the basket, misses his first layup, but then he has the presence of mind to reach out with his other hand and tip the ball back into the basket. Seton Hall's up by one. Diarra gets the inbound pass, throws a 60-yard shot that hits the rim but bounces away, and you know the result is the result. So it was just I think it was at least in those last two segments, everything that could go wrong for Connecticut did go wrong. But then the flip side to that is that, and I've said this before about some of our bad losses in the past, don't put yourself in a position where you can let every bad thing that could happen in a game like that. You don't, you basically at that point, you just find a way to do what you have to get getting the ball in bounds. I mean, they even had to try at some point what people are now calling the football play, where you line everybody behind the baseline, and at that point you have a couple of guys run you have one guy run deep, and you have three guys basically run crossing patterns in front of themselves, hoping that somebody will set a screen on somebody else and get the ball open. Now, in UConn's case, you have four guys on the court at that point between Diarra, Ball, McNeely, and Caravan, who you feel relatively comfortable getting an inbounds pass and getting fouled because they're all good foul shooters. You don't want Samson Johnson getting the ball because Samson Johnson is not a great foul shooter. But Johnson's probably running back. Johnson's probably your deep man on that play. So there's less of a. If he gets the ball deep, he's going to run and dunk it. So, I guess for some reason, whatever plays, either it was a combination of the play Hurley calls doesn't run as well as he wants it to, or the fact that Middleton, Dool, and Wusu are have such good defensive instincts that they just manage to do a tremendous job blocking all the passing lanes and making it difficult, if not impossible, for UConn to advance the ball in those inbounding situations. We've seen that happen in other games this season, by the way. Oklahoma State had a whole bunch of trouble getting the ball in bounds. Georgetown almost gave the game at the Rockaway because they couldn't get the ball in bounds. DePaul, for some reason, turned the ball over a bunch of times. That let Seton Hall get back into the game when Seton Hall beat DePaul at the Rock back in January. So, when Holloway's press has worked well, it has caused a lot of difficulty for people. A lot of people then say, well, why doesn't Holloway press all of the time? And that's a combination of he may not trust these guys can do it for 40 minutes. He may not think his team is deep enough to do a 40 minutes. But when he uses it strategically in a game like this, usually he's gotten a payoff from it, particularly if a team has had struggles like Connecticut's had at the point guard position.
So, a couple things. So I watched a shout out to Keith Egan. He put together a banger of that cinematic masterpiece, the cinematic replay of Saturday's win. So on the sequence where Ball turned it over in the final seconds of overtime, from what I could tell, I think it's plausible that Duval may have been trying to foul. Like it wasn't really Middleton. It looked like Duval was the one who initiated the contact with two hands to try to contain Ball, and his contact led Ball into Middleton. Do I think it was a foul? Yeah, I can make the argument that it could have been. Was it though? Especially in these kind of moments, I feel like these kind of refs, especially in this conference, they tend to swallow the whistle. So I think in regulation, as Middleton was guarding Caravan inbounding the ball, McNeely, I think, tripped over Middleton because Middleton was trying to run the baseline guarding Caravan, and then it was just inadvertent. McNeely just tripped over Middleton, and that was that. And Caravan was trying to get another timeout, but the referee had already called the 5 seconds before he could signal the timeout. So Seton Hall, they did such a great job of giving themselves the chance to force overtime and then win the game. And first of all, I can't believe Uri Arane, it was almost like the play against St. John's in 2018 where they may have had other guys who were decoys to try to get a three. And in the St. John's game when Shavar Reynolds hit the buzzer beater, Mamu slipped, he set a slip screen to open himself wide open to get the ball and try to, get a chance to win the game by looking to drive. But instead, as we know, he kicked to Shavar. Uri Arane, he must have been the slip screen guy, and that's how he found himself wide open. So I think it was obviously it didn't work because he missed the dunk, but it was a really good idea for him to slip, take, and try to get the easy 2 points and stop the clock right away. But I guess it was God's will that he missed the dunk, and that allowed Adewusu to tie the game. And this is such a good redemption arc for Dylan Adewusu, from not even getting a shot off against Georgetown just 2 months ago. And here he is, no hesitation, right on the left wing, doesn't hesitate. He knows. I mean, that was the look of a confident shooter. He caught it and shot it with confidence, and the release was really quick too. So he knew there was definitely a sense of urgency from him, and for him to hit that shot, I couldn't have been happier for him given that broader context of the fact that he had a chance to get a shot off against Georgetown down one, and he failed to do so.
Well, he certainly made up for it in the DePaul game,
right?
Because he went unconscious. He went except that he missed a foul shot, which was really, but that's a different story for a different day. He was huge in the win against DePaul back in the first week of January, and then unfortunately he gets injured right after that, misses the opportunity to play the big game with St. John's at the Rock a month ago. Didn't come back until Saturday. I think we had talked about this last week, that I had said that Wusu's coming back because Wusu didn't want to go out like this just because of the way he is, the fact that that he's just such a competitor. Say what you want, that his game has flaws, and there's no doubt. I mean, the guy's not the best shooter in the world. He's not the best ball handler in the world. He doesn't make the best decisions sometimes when he's on the court. But that guy brings intensity, night in and night out. That's we've talked about some of what's in the headspace of some of these guys playing for Seton Hall this season. We know when Dylan Adewusu gets on the court, all that guy wants to do is do whatever it takes to help his team win. The guy doesn't have one of those, and I think somebody had shown, I saw a picture on Twitter of what the NIT championship ring looked like. The guy, that guy has got a championship ring from Seton Hall. That's not an accident. The way that guy just he's looking to make a play. Sometimes he doesn't make the smartest play, but at least he's trying to make a play. And at least he's giving it. I mean, that's the reason why Shaheen Holloway plucked him off out of the portal 2 years ago, because he knew he knew, even though he was not the best scorer, maybe not. He knew that guy not only was trying to make plays, he brings out great defense. I mean, he had most of the assignment on McNeely. And if you saw, and I didn't see a lot of it, but I had, you see McNeely put up 36 against Creighton in their win out in Nebraska early last week. And now you give Dylan Adewusu the assignment of chasing McNeely around. And McNeely, I think, still had 16 points. But McNeely was not nearly the factor that he was in that game. They basically clamped down and dared somebody else to beat them. And Alex Caravan almost does, because Caravan in the second half found his jump shot and almost snuck Connecticut past the finish line Saturday afternoon, but they were just one play away from getting that win on two different occasions, and they couldn't get it. So, the other thing I would say, just as an aside, is as happy as we are to win the game, sometimes a game like that tells you more about the team that loses than it tells you about the team that wins. And we're not going to, this is not an episode of the Igloo where we're reaching out to Connecticut fans to give them an analysis of their team. But it's clear that they've got some stuff to work on if they're going to think about winning a third consecutive national title based upon what they put out on the floor Saturday afternoon.
So I definitely want to touch on the fact that, the guys that we expected to step up and have the games that they had. I mean, Zay with 23 points earned himself a spot in the Big East honor roll today. So congrats to Zay. Dylan Adewusu in his first game back, he did everything that you could have asked him to do, especially coming back for his first game in several weeks. He delivered, and that game tying three was I can't emphasize enough how massive that was for the team and for him specifically. Scotty, great defensively, and then makes the game winner on a putback. He gets the steal, and then he gets the putback after he got his own rebound to get the putback and get the 2 points that put Seton Hall over the top and wins the game. But the star of this one, really, and I know you touched on this earlier, God's will Ariarene was just so superb. He came to play. He really came to form. We talked about how raw he was, how he had all this potential. All that potential came out on Saturday. 12 points, 10 rebounds, his first career double-double. He played like a dominant Big East big should. And I got to tip my cap to the guy. I mean, no Gus Yalden in this game. We haven't even touched on that. Obviously, Chauncey Jenkins missed the game, but no Gus Yalden. So really, all you had at the five was Ariarene and Okorafor. And Ariarene stepped up to the plate, and he did not play like a freshman. He played like he'd been under this program for 3-4 years. He stepped up against a two-time defending national champion with experienced bigs like Samson Johnson. Terrace Reed Jr. was really good too. But the way that Ariarene played, he threw down several dunks, including a nasty putback in the first half. They needed him to have the kind of performance that he did. Um, I don't know if Shaw was in his ear or anyone on the staff or any of his teammates were in his ear, but whatever led to him having that kind of performance, he clearly looked motivated and like he was a man on a mission. And I
I want
got
to
to tip
back
my
up.
cap to him.
I want to back up there in the last week when they played Georgetown down in Washington. And he gets the assignment of having to defend and go head to head with Thomas Sorber, who a lot of people think is being drafted in the first round of the draft coming up in June. So the fact that he hung in there with Sorber the week before, I think he ended up with 8 points and 6 rebounds in that game. But if you watch the game, you know that he held Sorber down until like the closing minutes. I think Sorber only had like 7 and 6 up until about 5 minutes to go. I don't know if I forgot if Aaron A had fouled out of that game against Georgetown, but I know that Sorber gets a couple of dunks when Georgetown puts Seton Hall away down the stretch of that game. But for the first 35, 36 minutes of that game, Aaron Aronay is holding his own against Sorber, which I think is a major confidence boost. Although he's a freshman, he's played a lot of minutes this season. Part of that's because he's had to, because you've had injuries. Emmanuel Okorafor has been in and out of the rotation because of injuries and because Holloway has lost confidence at times in him this season. But when you get, it's sort of one of the things they say when you get to this point of the season, where if a freshman has played a lot of minutes, he's no longer really a freshman. He's really got past the freshman stage because a lot of freshmen get seen and not heard and don't play a lot of minutes. But the fact that Aaron Aronay has been called on time and time again this season means that he's put in the reps, he's put in the effort. What's he started about 20 games so far. Some of those games he only played like 5 minutes, but he's logged a lot of minutes this season. He's probably logged more minutes than Holloway thought he was going to when everyone took the court last summer. But that guy has certainly shown that he's learning as he goes. And the fact that he was able just to grab every rebound. I think one of the things I had commented on is that I'm thinking about guys that I saw play center, guys like Jackie Kaba and Roger Ingram and Bayonne Tatey. These are older guys. And then there's a guy who you and I are pretty familiar with, good old Ike Obiagu
Oh, yeah.
from a couple of years ago. One of the problems that Ike, great guy, smart guy, making more money than you and I are making right now, I think, because he's got a nice job on, brilliant guy. The problem was that he has horrific hands. That was a guy you could not make regular offensive plays for, because he couldn't get his hands to do what his head said. I want to get the ball. I want to get my hands over the rim and get the ball into the basket, but his hands couldn't. His hands couldn't tell. His hands couldn't react to the way his brain wanted them to react. So unfortunately, that's the reason why Obiagu never really met what we thought his potential was. As much as an effort he was making, great shot blocker, all the other stuff. Aaron Aronay's got his body working a little bit better than Obiagu's body ever got working, and you can throw like middle of the first half. Justine Felton throws this tremendous pass, from the middle of the lane, and Aaron Aronay scoops it up and puts the ball in the basket. So he's already showing that he's got the hands that work with it. He's learned how to attack the basket over these past few weeks, and he's getting a lot better at clearing the boards on the rebounding end. So I think it's going up, and it can only get better from here from Aaron Aronay. So the good news going forward is that Seton Hall has found a guy who you can go into the later part of the season and next season as the guy you can put in the center position and start to have some confidence that he's going to contribute night in and night out. Give you maybe give you double digit averages in points and rebounds next season. Then you walk in with that next season, and then you just have to put the other pieces in place. And you know that if he's going to play at that level, Seton Hall is going to be better the rest of this season and next season, simply just based upon the fact you have a center that you have some trust and confidence in.
Really setting the table for him to potentially, if he does come back, get Biggie's Most Improved Player of the Year next year. I mean, that would be incredible, but we're looking way too far ahead. But speaking of looking ahead, let's talk about this week. In brief, at Marquette tomorrow night, and then Xavier, who has been playing really well as of late, they come to the Rock on Sunday afternoon. Marquette, on the other hand, they're reeling a little bit. They were like a 2 seed looking like that a few weeks ago, and they did the top 16 seed reveal on Saturday on CBS, and they weren't part of that because of how they've been slipping. I feel like we're getting Marquette at a good time. I mean, what do you make of that matchup in Milwaukee?
Well, we thought that when we played Marquette at the Rock
Oh yeah,
4 weeks ago,
yeah,
and
true.
Marquette put a pounding on us. Marquette's got stuff to figure out. Uh, I wrote that on the Big East blog, the Big East blog this morning, doing my late season power rankings. If you want to take a look at those for fun, uh, they've the problem they have is that uh, they can't rebound, and they've had a lot of struggles. Rebounding's been an issue, and they've had a lot of struggles production off, getting production off the bench, amongst other things. And the other problem is that they're having trouble getting consistent scoring when Cam Jones isn't going off. Now, Jones didn't go off in the game at the Prudential Center. Stevie Mitchell had a big game, and Mitchell's been inconsistent offensively and defensively over the past few weeks. So if you're if there's sort of a hope for Seton Hall again, as long as everyone's healthy, we know we're going to put a better team on the court than the team that we put on the court down at the Rock 4 weeks ago. The question is, what's Marquette been doing? I think Marquette comes in off a week. I think they had, who did they lose to? Did they lose? Who they
Uh, they beat
they
DePaul
beat
in the
DePaul,
middle of the
right?
week. Yeah.
They beat DePaul after they but allowed them to break a losing streak. They had lost to St. John's. They had lost to Connecticut. They had lost to Creighton out in Creighton.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not coming in off their best form. They have had a week off. They've had stuff to figure out. Uh, the home crowd at Pfizer Forum is one of amongst the good crowds in the conference. So, they might be looking for the kill early in this game, and then knock Seton Hall out of the box. I think Aaron Aronay is going to be a big factor because on the guy who's going to be taking up a lot of the assignment against Aaron Aronay, at least early in the game, is Ben Gold. Uh, Ben Gold is a great 3-point shooter when he gets open threes, but Ben Gold is practically useless. Ben Gold has given them nothing or very little in terms of interior play, and he's not a good rebounder. I'm expecting that they're going to probably try to use this freshman they brought in, Demarius Owens, 6'9" guy. But Owens is built like a brick house. He's like 240. They project him to be the starting power forward next season. They expect him to be more of an interior presence than Marquette has had in the Shaka Smart era. I'll be curious to see if Smart goes more with Owens tomorrow night if Aaron Aronay gets off to a quick start. Of course, then the problem that Seton Hall has to deal with is you've got to be able to defend, four incredible four guys on the perimeter who have the potential to shoot the lights out and blow you out of the building. Jones, Mitchell, Chase Ross, and David Joplin. Any of those four guys can go off for 20 points. Jones could go off for 40 if he's really in his bag tomorrow night. So I think that the home crowd, I think it's a game that I know they're sort of out of the Big East regular season race, but again, they're playing for seeding. They're playing to do some damage in March. So that's the type of we talk about what they call get right games. So that's one they wanted. They want to get this one in. They want to get this one in their pocket early, because I think they've got games coming up later. I think they've got to take a trip out to Connecticut later this season, and they get St. John's in for the last game of the regular season. So I think Marquette just wants to bank as many easy wins as possible because they know they've got tough games coming up later in the season. You switch over to Xavier. Xavier is interesting. Uh, I think that the last game I watched Xavier play most of was their game against Villanova at in Philadelphia on Super Bowl Sunday, and they just played a horrific second half against Villanova, and they lost that game by 12. Look, I mean, obviously Xavier's a dangerous team. Brian Conwell, Zach Fremantle, Dalian Swain Davian Swain has really taken off over the past month, the power forward for Xavier. He's starting to give Colby Jones vibes. We know who Colby Jones. We know what happened with Colby Jones getting drafted in the second round 2 years ago. So he's starting to look like an NBA prospect out there. And we know what they did to Seton Hall out at the Cintas Center 6 weeks ago. So nobody on the one hand, on paper, nobody should be delusioned that Xavier's not walking in the better team, and Xavier might still be playing for NCAA at-large hopes, although they need a lot of things to go well to get into that position. The flip side is it's Pink Out for Cancer Day at the Prudential Center. So if you haven't made plans to get to the Rock, there'll be a lot of opportunities to. Part of the proceeds for that game go to cancer research. Seton Hall does a very good job on their Pink Out compared to some other schools. So it means something. It means something to the players, that game. One of the most memorable ones. This was right after you left Seton Hall. So I don't know if you were there for that, but I know I was there for the game in 2020.
Oh yeah, Mamu.
When we're playing Butler, and we took a big lead in the closing minutes, and then this guy, I think what was the name of the guy for Butler who just couldn't miss threes?
Oh, Sean McDermott.
Sean McDermott. McDermott hits like 3 threes in the last minute of that game, and Butler manages to tie the game up with like 3 seconds to go, and all of a sudden, somehow on the inbounds pass, McKnight finds Mamoukelashvili driving down the lane. Mamoukelashvili just throws the ball up at the basket, and it hits the rim twice, bounces in, and the rest is history. So, cancer, Pink Out for Cancer it may not be the same as what it's like in a place like Creighton, but I think Seton and Providence does a good job of it. But Seton Hall does a fairly good job on that night, and I think the players will come out inspired for that game. So I expect something to be competitive, because I think the other thing to think about with Creighton is that Creighton's going to come out nervous in this game, because
Xavier?
I think my bad. Xavier's going to come out. Xavier's going to come out nervous in this game because Xavier knows how. Xavier's coming out nervous in this game because they know they're going to feel the pressure of having to win this game, whereas Seton Hall the rest of the way, nothing to lose. At this point, the beating Connecticut's sort of like beating Connecticut's going to be the highlight of the season, I think. But at this point, you have nothing to lose. You can play loose. You can sort of just throw your effort out there. The one thing I thought which was good off the Connecticut game was how excited the players seemed to get after getting that win. And that's something, of course, that you would have thought a team like, no slight to DePaul, by the way, from what happened with them last season was just, I don't want to use the tragedy's not the right word here, but it was just you felt awful for them because you know that team really just packed it in on the season when Big East play started and Stubblefield got fired. But at least Seton Hall looked like they were happy and excited to get a win. And the only way you can get that feeling back is if you find ways to win other games. So while, yeah, Xavier is the better team on paper, Xavier has played better than Seton Hall, but not as well as they would have liked to have played. And you put some pressure on the Musketeers, and they've shown at times this season they crack under the pressure. They blew a close game against Marquette right before Christmas. They blew the 16-point lead against St. John's at the Garden about 3 or 4 weeks ago. They lost that winnable game against Villanova in Philadelphia 2 weeks ago. So that's a team that if you put them in a tough spot, sometimes they act well with it, sometimes they don't. So I don't want to sit here and be like, all right, I'm not going to predict we're going to go 1-1. Let's not be crazy here because again, still, we're still a bottom of the league team, but everything breaks right the way it did Saturday afternoon, and Seton Hall could leave the Rock with a W Sunday afternoon against a desperate Xavier team.
The thing is, I was looking at Xavier's schedule, the final 5 games of the season for them. They get Butler twice at against us in Newark. Creighton at home's the only real tough one, which is going to be a whiteout in Cincinnati March 1st. And then they close out at home against Providence. Like, if they go 4-1 and they get a little bit of help, like, they're going to be – they know that if they lose to Seton Hall, that's a backbreaker for them. So they're going to come out – I mean, I hate to use the terminology that Dan Hurley used in the huddle, calling it like, this is our Super Bowl. Like, it's a game you can't afford to lose if you're Xavier. I know there's going to be a couple other games that they couldn't afford to lose in that final 5-game stretch, but point still stands. They know they need to win this one. And Seton Hall at this point, like, they're playing with house money. Like, they're going to be playing spoiler the whole season. So if they play loose like they did against UConn, and now that the home crowd and the fan base has a lot more energy injected into them, I mean, who's to say that, Lightning can't strike twice in Newark?
Yeah, I mean, again, the crowd, there's going to be a bigger crowd, in part because it's Sunday, in part because of the pink out. Again, people show up when they know that some of the proceeds are going to a good cause. So there's a number of reasons why that crowd will be a little more into it than we have in some of the other Big East games this season. So, it's going to be fairly exciting. I'm also I'll tag him on this too. Shout out to one of the best Big East guys in the league, BJ at Dana Gardens. Will be making his first trip out to the Prudential Center Sunday afternoon. So I hope for his sake Xavier plays well. Maybe not well enough to get the win, but I hope he's not as disappointed. Well, if they lose, he'll be disappointed about that. But I've met him a couple of times in my recent trips to Cincinnati. Maybe one of the best dive bars in the country is Dana Gardens, within walking distance of the campus and at the Cintas Center. So he'll be in the building on Sunday for Xavier. So I hope I hope he has safe travels out to New Jersey. And as much as I'd like to see his team play well, I hope they don't play well enough that they blow us out of the building Sunday afternoon. So they ought to be pretty. I'm excited about this game Sunday for those reasons, regardless of how well or not well we play in that game on Sunday.
So the last thing, I guess that's like your last lick. Mine, I'm pretty sure last week on Monday. Oh no, we recorded. I think we might have recorded Tuesday.
Tuesday, yes.
Yes. So if I remember correctly, I said having a bye week is going to be to Seton Hall's advantage. It'll give them time to hit that reset button that they desperately needed And Nostradam ice has struck again. So I'm gonna keep that last bit nice and brief. Well, it's their last bye week of the season. It's gonna be a sprint to the finish line, and again, it starts with two. Again, the home stretch of the schedule is tough, but the final 6 games, well, the final sprint, big week at Marquette, a place where they've really struggled, and against a Xavier team that has been really good at the Cintas Center. 5-2 in Big East play there, but they're 3-5 away from it. That's a major difference as far as I'm concerned. And Xavier, I mean, they started off 1-4 in Big East play. A lot of people forget that, but they've won 7 of their last 10. And they got that favorable schedule ahead of them. And who knows, they might go into the Rock in a similar situation as UConn, where they were just expecting to just come right in and get an easy win. But it's crazy to say that even with as bad of a season Seton Hall is having, the Prudential Center is still a house of horrors for the UConn Huskies because they have yet to beat the Pirates. I pointed this out last week. It's crazy to me. They still have yet to beat Seton Hall at the Rock with a capacity crowd in the building, because the only time they've beaten us in Newark, there were fans in the building because that was the first and only game that, New Jersey had allowed fans to, come into sporting events, but only like 10% capacity or whatever it was. And it was the infamous Bryce Aiken, I had never missing game.
Now, they had beaten us before they left the AAC.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying since rejoining.
Right. Yeah,
But,
since 2020, it's the first time. It's the only time they've been Hurley's been 1-4 as Connecticut coach when he's played Seton Hall at the Prudential Center. So, yeah, and none of the one was that the Bryce Aiken 1,000 people in the Rock game. So, yeah. So my joke this morning was thinking about this was that death taxes Seton Hall beats UConn at the Prudential Center. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I just still can't believe it. And I will never live that down. I had never missed it. Oh my God. But
Poor Bryce Aiken.
I hope wherever he is, I hope he's doing well. So he might be watching this episode for all we know. So if you happen to be watching, Bryce, I hope you're doing well. And that you ain't never missing with what you're doing in life now. So yeah, before chaos really ensues at the end of this episode, that is going to conclude this episode of Hoist the Colors. Coach Tony Bozzella was pretty busy, and I understand, especially after the loss to Marquette on Wednesday. He had to get ready for a turnaround at Providence on Sunday. Big win for them. They get UConn Wednesday night, coming off them beating the brakes off of South Carolina down there and ending a 71-game home win streak in Columbia. That's just bewildering to me. And then after that, I think they're home again over the week. No, they're on the road, and then they have their senior night on the 27th. So still trying to work on getting Coach B, but do expect him to come on, hoist the colors. Definitely before the Big East tournament, by the end of the regular season as well. So for Pat Madden, I'm Tim Best. Thanks for tuning in to a much more positive edition of Hoist the Colors. And until next time, onward to Tonia.